The world has been watching a very strict lockdown in China's financial hub, Shanghai, over the past weeks. Authorities have announced to allow residents of more than 7,000 housing compounds to go out after nearly a month of lockdowns in certain areas in the city. However, only after 24 hours of imposing the change, local authorities have took a big U-turn on its policies and once again ordered residents from those compounds and those free areas to stay home, and they cannot really go out again without any essential reasons. So before these recent back and forth, China already have extended their lockdown of Shanghai to cover all of its more than 25 million population. So initially they had been separated areas for the eastern side and the western side in the city, but now we can also say that the whole city is still subject to indefinite restrictions.
Bang, you've been doing some really excellent reporting this week on the response from people. Some of them can't get food, many have been separated from their children. Give us a sense of what's been happening to people and how they're feeling about it.
Yes, Beth. Residents in some area of the city said the strict policy actually means no one was allowed to leave their housing compounds, not even to collect essential provisions, food, water, or other important materials such as medication. So people in the city are confined to their homes. Most of them have to order in food and water and wait for government drop-offs of vegetables, meats, or eggs. And social media video also showed that complaints by angry residents, they were ranting about they are running out of food. The whole family was actually sharing a piece of bread for probably a day. And some of them were also complaining that some elderly people or some people living with severe chronic disease are still waiting for their medications. So it's chaotic. And Shanghai, thinking about Shanghai is one of the most developed cities in China. It's an important financial hub, which contributed to over 3% of China's GDP. The lifestyle in Shanghai has been such a great example of China's economic growth. But the contrast during this lockdown is that people are suffering, they are renting online, they are complaining and criticizing the government's COVID-0 policies.
It has led, as you pointed out, to some almost violent skirmishes between people who have been desperate to get provisions, but have also been very outspoken, as you point out, by their opposition to this approach. Is it a risk for the Chinese government to keep going down this COVID-0 path?
Yes. So for China, the COVID-0 policy has been such a great propaganda in terms of telling the citizens how great Chinese government work has been comparing with the pandemic around the world. Given that China has closed its border for over 2 years and there are very strict travel bans on certain countries who are experiencing COVID situation, basically in the city of 25 million residents, a lot of people didn't really expect the surge of COVID cases could ramp up to probably like 13,000 cases a day. And it's also very interesting to see that on social media, people are having a large scale of discussions about how bad their situation is in Shanghai. And definitely there are censorship that is imposed by social media platforms in China. But at the same time, we can say that there are still a lot of talking about people asking for help. They are asking for the other residences offering to survive, and also criticizing and finding their children from the collective quarantine sites because they are separated from their families. And those comments and those criticism on Chinese social media have created a huge scale of discussions, which is actually generated by a lot of like people who don't really believe in the COVID zero policy anymore. But the censorship also means that there is only a certain degree of comments and voices from Australia we can actually find and we can hear.
Yeah. As you say, it's been such an international hub, Shanghai. There are many expats from countries around the world living and doing business there. Could it cause lasting damage to the future prosperity of the city?
Shanghai is China's most international city and one of the most important financial hubs. As I just mentioned, Shanghai contributed to over 3% of China's GDP since 2018. So it's definitely attractive to a lot of expats from around the world. But one issue there is that given some very cruel policies generated by China's dynamic COVID zero strategy, expats are seeing children are separated from their families, and people living with health conditions are not being allowed to access those medical facilities. And those situations is really a big challenge for a lot of expats we spoke to as we were discovering and covering the situation in Shanghai. Some of them were Australians, and they told us they want to leave the city and they want to come back to Australia. And in China, when a huge scale of COVID restrictions are imposed, there is no economic subsidies provided to citizens and business, which means reportedly there were businesses started to close and shut down since the restriction imposed by authorities in China. So I think as a prospect, we are going to see how the Shanghai lockdowns will actually pose a risk for China's economic growth, and later, we can see more expats will actually provide their perspectives, when the restrictions are eased in the future.
Yeah. Bang, great reporting from your team this week. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Bev.